Welcome to the Veiled Oracle. My name is Nzinga. Thank you for joining me. On this channel, we talk about African traditional spirituality with a focus on the spiritual traditions of the Shona people of Southern Africa. Sit with me for a while as we look to the wisdom of the ancients for solutions to some of our modern day problems. Remember, we are spirit having a human existence. In my last posts, I referred to the tensions between or arising from the usage of the native word for God by modern Christianity in a linguistic maneuver that created the impression that indigenous Africans did not have a God and that they worship demons or evil spirits as they engage in their spiritual practice of ancestor reverence. You will notice I keep using the word reverence because we do not worship our ancestors. Within the pantheon of ancestors, within I would say the philosophy of ancestor reverence is the recognition that they are but a part of a structure of beings in the spirit world, and they are our entry point, they are our messengers, they are our representatives with the Almighty. And every prayer is ended off with, please pass this our message to the Creator. Please pass this our message, pass this our request to Mwari. One interesting aspect that you will notice when African traditional spirituality comes up for discussion is the way in which there are specific words that are reserved for use when African traditional spirituality is discussed. But similar practices by any other broad community is worded differently. What do I mean? Let me give specific examples. When we speak of our clan spirits, and I will give the example of, we have a clan spirit of Nehoreka, whose divine powers were of bringing about rain. And whenever there was a long drought, the Kore people, to whom the clan ancestor guide Nehoreka is there. I was going to say it belongs, but it doesn't belong to the Kore, but he is of the Kore. Now, if there was a long drought, the Kore clan would perform the rain-making ritual. And whoever was the vessel, whoever was channeling Nehoreka at that particular point in time would lead the ceremony, and rain would fall. The perception these days, or in a lot of the way in which it is conveyed would be, well, these people are engaging in this superstitious practice, and they They are praying to some evil entities, and anyway, the dead are dead and do not have power to influence the living. The only dead entities that have that kind of power are those that have been endorsed as legitimate. Jesus Christ, Mohammed, right? But then, when other communities revere saints and have ceremonies for saints and go on to pilgrimages where saints are buried, that is okay. But those saints were people who actually walked the earth plane and died in this physical reality. And then they manifested their presence in spirit. And by their ability to manifest their presence in a positive way, in a way that brings assistance and guidance and benefit to the living, they are then elevated to sainthood. But when an African ancestor conveys their spiritual presence to the living and engages in bringing about benefits to the living through rain, through a good crop, through healing, a different word is used. They are just an ancestor. But this one is a saint. I'll leave you to process that. Let's talk to me. I'm a spirit medium, and I conveyed that I am a medium for specific ancestor guides. But when I'm written about, I'm called a witch doctor. When other traditions speak to their people who do exactly what I do, oh, those are now shamanic traditions. Those are shamans. Those are spiritual gurus. Those are priests and priestesses. Those are psychics. I do acknowledge that it is only recently that the psychic has lost most of its not at the dinner table reputation. But still, it is interesting how somebody who uses herbs and the understanding of the essence of herbs and their healing properties, again, is called a witch doctor. But if they are not African, they are a herbalist. They understand homeopathy. They are a medicine man, medicine woman. I hope you get where I'm going with this. We are talking about the politics of spirituality. We are talking about the conquest of souls. We are talking about the shattering of identity. Here is the thing. What happens When you tell a person that their ancestors were are and were evil, what does it do to a person's psyche and sense of self? When you are made to believe that respecting your ancestors should be avoided, when you are made to believe that your ancestors are gone for good and the only form of respect you should show is just acknowledging that they existed, but you are made to view the ancestors of other nations as holy, as sacred, what does it do to you? Self-loathing. Definitely in a serious existential crisis. I will tell you that you would be surprised at the extent to which a lot of so-called, quote unquote, modern Africans will balk at the idea of being seen to be engaging in any traditional practice, to be eating their own traditional cuisine, to be recognizing anything to do with their roots. And I tell you, dear viewer, it was not by accident. It was by design. And I can go even further to say, why was it called the dark continent? We have the most sun. In the southern hemisphere. So it definitely has got nothing to do with the geography or the weather. There are other continents and places that are definitely dark. Could it have something to do with our skin tone? But why is it that continents with light-skinned people are not called the white continent? These are tough questions, but as an African, are questions that I'm putting out there, not just for other Africans, but for the global community at large. Because if you do not see, if you do not recognize that you are unwell, you're not going to seek treatment. There is a general belief that permeated the mindset of the colonialists, which translated the darkness of the skins of Africans into an overall darkness of their being. I'm saying this, but I want to cry. They are dark-skinned. That means everything they do is dark and evil. Their hearts are dark and evil. Their practices are dark and evil. We must save them from their darkness. And now we use skin lighteners. I can't believe that just happened. Talking about being saved from darkness and the power went off. I don't know what Spirit is trying to say here, but I'll proceed. So, a spin-off from that notion that Black people have to be saved from their Blackness has been the extensive marketing and use of skin lightening creams. The implications of the sense of self and rejection of self and aspiration to an acceptance or a value standard of acceptance being revolving around lightness and whiteness is something I'm not going to discuss right now. I mention it because it is relevant when we're understanding spirituality, because a large portion of being grounded within a spiritual reality is accepting the presence of God in your makeup. We say we are the children of the stars. We say we were made from stardust. As our souls evolve, the final stage of the soul's transmigration is to go back to being a star and joining the star family in the skies. That is a Zulu tradition, or it's a Zulu belief. Now, when among ourselves, we have those who use military might and conquests to then convince other peoples that they are lesser, what right do they have to do that? Aren't we all children of the stars? Aren't we all made of stardust? Aren't we all a reflection of the divine? I digress. But as you can see, it is political. And the point I'm trying to make is that to the extent that the African was wrenched from a particular kind of philosophy that had been used to govern society, to govern values, and inform social conduct, they were left bereft. There are a lot of tenets of the philosophy of Ubuntu that were discarded. But I'll ask you, the viewer, if the African belief system was so backward and so ignorant, how come Africa is the one continent that still has one of the biggest concentrations of the population of all kinds of wildlife? Who kills animals? Who kills animals? Is it the barbarian or the civilized person? Most of you who are watching are dog and cat lovers. And some of you might probably even love your cats and dogs more than you love other human beings. I'm not judging, just pointing out. So we are agreed. Only a barbaric, cruel, nasty, evil person would wantonly kill an animals. The modern vegetarian movement is informed in large part by avoiding cruelty to animals. So I come back to the question, who kills animals? Is it the barbarian or the civilized person? Africa has got the greatest concentration of animals in the wild. Domestic animals. That's just one example. I can give another example. Which society was the first to have prisons, to have jails? Who was first to put people in cages and starve them as punishment? In case you did not know, Africa didn't have prisons until the colonialists brought them to us to be used to incarcerate guess who, no prizes. So what is it in the African indigenous value system, in the African traditional spirituality that led to a society that did not wantonly kill wildlife, that did not have prisons for wrongdoers, that had a spiritual belief system where disrespect to the mother brought upon you the wrath of the ancestors. Let me move on. I hope you are understanding some of what I'm talking about. And if you have any comments, inputs, questions, clarifications, please feel free. Post your comments in the comments box, and I would be more than happy to pick up any specific questions for future discussions. So there are a lot of arguments that you hear where people will say, well, African traditional spirituality fell by the wayside as a natural progression of development, social evolution. It fell into disuse because it was inherently inferior and another superior philosophy came on board and people made choices. So the average modern African will tell you, I've made a choice. I made a choice. Let's talk about choice. If you will indulge me, let's talk about choice. The first level of choice is how in the early 1900s, when the missionaries were recruiting members to their congregation, they would offer goodies for people to attend church. They would offer sweets, they would offer cake, whatever they could that would entice people to attend church. On the other hand, they were enacting laws. Yes, laws. We are talking about the criminalization of the practices of indigenous spirituality. Some colleagues in Europe might be familiar with the Witchcraft Suppression Act, which in some countries it was repealed as late as the 1960s. But that is the time when it was being enacted in the colonies. Isn't that interesting? Yes, this act, it was very good to suppress the witches. It was very efficient to get us to burn the witches at the stake. Let's take it to the colonies. There'll be lots of witches out there. Oh, sometimes we make jest of heavy topics to make it easy to digest. So we had a law, and it still exists, which basically describes all the practices of indigenous spirituality, the throwing of bones by diviners, the use of herbs and incantations by healers, mediumship, the talking to spirits. And then it says, all these category of behaviors, anyone who claims to be able to divine through the throwing of bones, anyone who claims to be able to heal, anyone who claims to commune with the world of spirit is committing an offense. Okay. Now, how do you tell me I have a choice when you've basically told me that only one form of spiritual engagement is valid, and that the other alternative that is available to me, if I so choose that one, I will be tried for crimes? I'll let you digest that. Here is a notion of superiority and inferiority based on the mode of transmission of knowledge. Our grandparents were convinced that by virtue of the religion that was being brought to them, by virtue of it being written, it sufficed as the complete word of God. God spoke, it was written, and that is the only word of God. that was legitimate, because it was superior, because it was written. The indigenous, native God was necessarily inferior, because where is it written? Word of mouth? That's heresy. It has to be written. If you cannot produce a written document of your God, that means your God doesn't exist. And if your God does exist, that God is necessarily inferior, because that God does not have a structure, a building dedicated to that God, does not have rules and procedures. And then the poor natives were like, no, but we also have rules and procedures. We have ways in which we communicate and pray. Ah, that's barbaric. That's savagery. How do you pray? We make offerings of food and animals. That's savage. That's savage. The killing of animals and the letting of blood in satanic rituals. For those of you with a sharp mind, you've already drawn the analogy. Every week, we offer the body and blood of you know who. But that's okay. All right. You get me. So, we're still talking about choice. From kindergarten, from preschool, you are taught hymns, stories, all related to that one particular religion. It's now embedded in your education system. When you go to school every morning, you must go through a religious ritual. Your conscious mind does not recognize it for what it is. It's just something that you do every morning at assembly. You recite the Lord's Prayer. For those of us who went to missionary schools, it's every morning and every evening. So your whole life, you are living a reality, a syllabus of life where the state, the school system, the syllabus of the school system has embedded within it a particular religious value system. So you have gone through all your formative years being indoctrinated into this belief system and being reminded that what your ancestors did was backward and ignorant, and you are a modern, developed, evolved, smart, modern African. You have made a choice. I'm not here to recruit. No. When I first published my book, there were requests to form a church. Oh my goodness. It's amazing how we get so conditioned to our mindsets so conditioned to the frameworks of that which we are familiar with, that even as we explore the unfamiliar, we still want to take with us the mindsets and the structures of that which we are familiar with. It's like, I'm looking for an example. It's like you grew up eating cake and your palate of food is based on the ingredients like milk and sugar and butter. And now you're being introduced to savory dishes. And your first question is, so where's the sugar? I mean, no disrespect. I laugh a lot. Like I said, levity makes it easier to digest difficult subjects. So I was saying, when I first published my book, I was invited, people were requesting, why don't you set up a church? And I was thinking, didn't you hear anything of what I have been saying for the past 3 years? African traditional spirituality is not organized around churches. We do not have priests presiding over religious ceremony. Why? Because every head of household is their own priest. You are your own priest. You approach the hearth of your home, and on your hearth, you speak to your ancestors of your lineage, because they are always around you. They are at your hearth, in your home. You speak to your ancestors of your lineage and to the ancestors of your clan. And you request them to transmit your requests and pleas to the Almighty, the one who is. There are no intermediaries among the living. But of course, we know there are some who find that extremely objectionable because they prefer to be your intermediaries. So right there, you have part of the reason why the ways of the indigenous people were criminalized. So I've spoken about how the religion of the colonizer was supported through open bribery, incentives, criminalizing the native spirituality, infusing it into the school curriculum. And here we are today, with a whole generation, if I may say, 2 generations that have been raised on a diet of looking at their own value system as inferior, of looking to the spiritual principles and values and practices of their forebearers as evil, and of looking to the religion of the conqueror, not just as being superior, but as a vehicle of being saved from one's own darkness, a vehicle to be saved from one's own very identity. But what is it that they're supposed to aspire to? If it was just aspiring to an ideology and a value system of the alternative religion that was brought in, that's not a problem. But remember, this is a choice that has been informed by a systematic alienation from one's roots and origins and identity, which necessarily denotes within that aspiration is embedded a subtle subtext that which one is aspiring to is necessarily something that is as un-African as you can get it to be, as divorced from your roots and ancestry as you can get it to be, as divorced from your spiritual identity as you can get to be. Because remember, you are created in a specific form, and you come into this world in a specific locale with a specific, into a specific tribe, race, community. If we agree that there is a divine purpose, a divine plan to where each of one is born, be it in wealth or poverty, global south, global north, east, west, dark skin, light skin, pink skin, brown skin, yellow skin, red skin. If we agree that there is a divine purpose, at what point do any of us gain the authority to question God's plan for creating Africans and other native communities, societies in the Southern Hemisphere, particularly the Southern Hemisphere? I know there are colleagues in South America, in Southern America, that face similar challenges as we do in Africa. As for colleagues in Australia and New Zealand, I will not go there, because as those of us who are conscious enough know, they were totally annihilated. But that is not why I'm here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I strongly urge you to do a bit of reading. The indigenous native occupants of Australia, indigenous native occupants of New Zealand. Thereby hangs a history. Let's come back to Africa. At least we're still here, thanks to the slave trade. They needed strong people I can survive working in the plantations that okay, yes. Our own strength and ability to work in the heat saved us from total annihilation. So I got myself off track. But the question I was asking was if there is a divine plan and a divine orchestration with different peoples in different parts of this beautiful planet we call Earth, each designed in color and language and culture according to the great divine design. At what point do we among us get to judge that this one is in superior and this one is inferior? No, do it my way. But didn't we just agree that there's a divine cosmic plan and that everything is by cosmic design? On that note, dear watcher, you beautiful child of the stars, I thank you for having stayed with me on this posting. If you like what I talk about, if you are in any way piqued and your curiosity aroused, I invite you to share a comment, drop a comment. If it's a specific question, please do share the question. I promise I'll read your question, and if I might answer it, or if it's a question that requires me to respond on this channel, then I will do so and acknowledge you for having posted that question, and we can talk about it. Thank you very much for listening and staying with me. And as usual, I invite you to please share with your colleagues, like, subscribe, so that you stay tuned and get notifications of future uploads. As always, remember, you matter. Because if you think you don't, those that think they matter more than you will make decisions on the things that matter to you. Keep well.